Hi everyone, I'm Wendy, and today I'm showing you a whole food plant-based grilled cheese and tomato soup. It has been so cold lately, and this is probably the most comforting meal I can think of to enjoy right now. It was always one of my favorites as a kid. For the tomato soup, I'm starting by sauteing an onion in a medium pot over medium-high heat. You can use any kind of onion, red, yellow, or white. I happen to have yellow onions today. And I don't cook with any oil, so I'm just putting this right in my hot pan. The onions will release quite a bit of their own liquid, so I throw them in and I leave them alone. If you're in a hurry, you could go ahead and dump the rest of the ingredients in now, but I'm going to take 5 to 10 minutes to saute and brown my onions. If you leave the onions undisturbed for 3 or 4 minutes, they'll start to brown, and then repeat that a couple of times until the onions are nice and caramelized. If anything does start to stick, you can just use a little bit of water or vegetable broth to deglaze the pan. Next, I'm adding garlic. Usually I add 4 cloves of minced garlic, but I actually only had 2 garlic cloves left. But you can add more or less to your taste. I'll saute the garlic just for a minute or two and then add the rest of my ingredients. I'll have a blog post linked in the description box below the video with the full recipe. But here I have 1½ teaspoons of dried basil, a ½ teaspoon of dried oregano, a ½ teaspoon of celery seed, a ¼ teaspoon of black pepper, and a teaspoon of a salt substitute. I'm using this one called Stardust by Well Your World, but you could use any salt substitute or simply add salt to taste. Next, I'm adding 2 jars of strained tomatoes. These jars are 24 ounces, and I love them because they don't have any salt or other additives. If you can't find these, you could use any other kind of canned tomatoes or fresh tomatoes if you like. I will be blending this soup, so it doesn't really matter what kind you use. These strained tomatoes are really nice though, because if you're in a hurry, it's basically already blended. Instead of using the fresh onions, you could use some onion powder, and you would have soup in less than 5 minutes. I'm also adding just a little bit of water, probably a total of 1/4 cup. I'll put a couple of tablespoons in each jar of tomatoes to shake it around and make sure I get everything out. Tomatoey dishes like this tend to splatter and make a mess, so I'm putting the lid on, and then I'll heat this at medium-high heat until it starts to bubble. As soon as it's heated through, you could go ahead and eat this, but the longer that you cook it, the better it's going to taste. So at this point, I like to turn the heat down and simmer it for at least 30 minutes. Again, I'll leave the cover on so I don't make a mess, and I'll stir it periodically to make sure the tomato doesn't burn on the bottom. While that's cooking, I'll show you how to make my grilled cheese. For the grilled cheese, I'm using this sprouted whole grain bread from Ezekiel. This comes in the frozen section at the grocery store, so you just want to make sure to take a couple pieces out to let them defrost. Of course, normally grilled cheese uses tons of butter to get that golden crust. But my secret ingredient today is aquafaba. This is just the liquid from cooked beans. Technically, you could use the liquid from any beans, but most of the time, people use the liquid from chickpeas. It's best to try to find canned beans with no salt added since we are using the liquid. What I like to do is whenever I open a can of chickpeas, I pour the liquid into an ice tray. And then once that's frozen, I can pop that into a freezer-safe bag, and I always have aquafaba ready to use. I won't need very much for this grilled cheese, so I just took out 1 cube to defrost. And then I'm using a silicone brush to brush the aquafaba on one side of my Ezekiel bread. I'll lay that side of the bread down in a preheated nonstick pan. Next, I'm adding a layer of cheesy sauce. This is my cheesy sauce recipe that has a base of white beans and sweet potatoes. I showed how to make this in my party food video, which I'll link for you, and I'll also have the recipe linked below. But you could use any vegan cheesy sauce that you like. Then I'll put my other piece of bread on top and brush another layer of the aquafaba on top. I'll cook this for a few minutes and check on it. If it's ready to flip, it should release from the pan pretty easily. If you're having trouble, let it cook another minute or two. Then we'll flip it, and you can always flip it back and forth if you don't get it quite as brown as you like it the first time. So you can cook it as long as you like to get it toasted however you prefer. Then we can go finish up the soup. Once the tomato soup has finished cooking, I'll use an immersion blender to blend it smooth. If you don't have an immersion blender, you could use a regular blender, just be very careful with the hot soup. And like I said before, you don't even really have to blend this. I'm just blending it to get that traditional Campbell's tomato soup vibe that many of us know and love from childhood. After the soup is blended, I'll give it a little taste, and you can adjust the seasonings as needed. Sometimes tomato-based dishes can be a little sour, and they need just a little bit of sweet to counteract that acidity. So for that, I would add just a little sprinkle of date sugar for a natural sweetness. And then we can serve it up. Tomato soup and grilled cheese has always been one of my favorite meals, and it's one of my dad's favorites as well. But he went plant-based shortly after I did and has been missing grilled cheese ever since. So I was so excited when I was able to come up with this recipe and surprise him with it. And he loved it. I hope your family will enjoy it too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.